So, have you ever wondered why you're alive? I mean, that's a question that I ask myself sometimes. And pretty much this process of respiration is what keeps us alive. It produces energy in the form of ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, the energy carrier molecule, as well as glucose, which is an energy storage molecule. But in essence, this is what keeps us alive. It's the process that we most rely on as living organisms to keep us going. So you might have learnt about respiration back in lower years as being a very simple sort of equation. It's C6H12O6 plus 6O2 goes to make 6 CO2 and 6 H2O, which is perfectly fine. That is the overall equation, but that's not actually what happens. There are many different processes that are involved before we actually get to the part where we can establish this overall equation. And the different parts that are involved I've labeled up. Also, I've included a diagram of a mitochondrion. Now, you should probably know this by now if you're at this stage, but a quick reiteration of what the mitochondrion is. You have an outer membrane and you have an inner membrane. Of course, this is important because of the fact that there's a theory, the endosymbiote theory, in the sense that initially the mitochondrion was just an aerobic organism, which basically consisted of this inner membrane. But as time moved on, an anaerobic organism kind of engulfed it in a larger vesicle, basically, and made use of it in that sense. And basically, that's how we think mitochondrions came to have the double membrane. But that's the best theory that we have so far. Anyway, a few structures that you should know of. The matrix. This is probably where most of the respiration takes place. It's kind of like the liquidy part or the cytoplasmic part of the mitochondrion, which is of most importance. But also very important is the actual cytoplasm that surrounds a mitochondrion. Okay, so in this video we're going to start off with the first part of respiration. Respiration, of course, by the way, there are two types. There's aerobic respiration, which is using oxygen, and there's anaerobic respiration. The first series will be on aerobic respiration using oxygen, and I'll also do a bit on anaerobic respiration as well. Okay, so today we're going to start off with aerobic respiration, and we're going to start off with the first part of aerobic respiration, which is this bit over here, which I've labeled glycolysis. Okay? Let's start. Glycolysis. If you look at the name itself, glycolysis, lysis means breakdown, glyco refers to a carbohydrate. So in this case it's glucose that we're breaking down. So glycolysis is something that takes place in every living organism. Okay? There may be some exceptions, but we're not gonna worry about them for now. This occurs in every living organism, okay? It doesn't matter if it's an anaerobic organism or if it's an aerobic organism. Every living organism has to have glycolysis taking place. So, what is glycolysis? And where does it take place? First of all, glycolysis is something that takes place in the cytoplasm of a cell, okay? It occurs in the cytoplasm of a cell. And essentially, the process of glycolysis involves the breakdown of glucose, okay, into two molecules of triose phosphate and then again into another type of molecule called pyruvic acid or pyruvate. And you get two times that, right? The way that we actually work what kind of this works is you have a glucose molecule which has 6 carbon atoms, right? Glucose molecule has 6 carbon atoms. Essentially what we do is we add 2 phosphate groups. 2 phosphate groups come along, we add 2 phosphate groups to either end. And what this does is it destabilizes the glucose molecule, and it kind of splits at the center. And you get an intermediate compound, which basically forms. This is phosphorylated glucose. Phosphorylated glucose. Okay, and this molecule is the kind of like the link between triose phosphate and thing. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, it splits in half, and you get 2 molecules of triose phosphate, each with a phosphate molecule attached to it. Triose. Oops, sorry, my bad. Yeah, why not? Yeah, and you get 2 molecules of those. Next, what you have happening is you get this molecule kind of breaking down even further. You get rid of those phosphate groups, and you end up with a pyruvate, which is a 3-carbon molecule. And you get 2 of those. And this essentially is the process of glycolysis. It's the breaking down of glucose using phosphate. Usually you get phosphate from a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Okay, ATP is involved in this process, and you need to basically, if you look at what you're basically putting in, you're putting in 2 phosphate groups. So there's an input of 2 ATP molecules. 2 times ATP molecules are needed to put into this process. But out of it you get 4 molecules of ATP. And that's important because overall then you get a net transfer of about 2 ATP production from glycolysis, which is something that is very important. Carte blanche d'un. Out of this process you also get 4 ATPs out, which is not the only thing that you get from this process. You also get an output of 2 molecules of NAD.H, which is reduced NAD. Now what is NAD, you might be asking me? Well, NAD is it's referred to as a coenzyme. It's a carrier, or a carrier molecule. You could refer to it as a carrier molecule as well. A carrier molecule. NAD. That's what it is. It carries this H group, to other parts of the respiration. Namely the ETC, etc., etc. But we won't get into that for now. We just need to know that 2 molecules of this NAD is produced. NADH, beg your pardon. NADH. Okay. So that's pretty much what glycolysis is, and it's the first step in the process of respiration. An important point to note, by the way, is that the relative sizes of pyruvate and glucose are important. So obviously glucose is a lot larger than pyruvate molecules. And if you think about it, this is probably one of the reasons why glucose doesn't feature in most of the respiration from here on out. If you imagine, of course, the mitochondrion's membrane has these specific pores, okay? There are pores in the mitochondrion's membrane through which a glucose molecule, let's say this is a glucose molecule, might try to pass through, but of course it will be rejected because it's too big. A pyruvate molecule, on the other hand, let me use another color. This is probably not the best color. So this is glucose, and a pyruvate molecule in comparison would probably be that big, and it'll pass through perfectly fine through one of those membranes and come out the other side, right? That's one of the main reasons why we have to break pyruvate down. Glucose down into pyruvate, is to allow the transfer through to the mitochondria. This process of phosphorylation of glucose, it's important to produce pyruvate, but also in certain processes you can also phosphorylate other types of molecules like glycogen, for example, which can only be done by liver cells. And there's a reason for that, because if you start, it's involved with the actual requirements of muscle cells and cells that really require glucose, and as a result it's better off just to regulate that process, the breakdown of glycogen, the phosphorylation of glycogen, just to liver cells, which we won't get into now because it's not in the scope of this video. So yeah, that's to be honest, that's all there is to glycolysis. Take what you will from this lesson. I will pick up in the next part of respiration, which is the link reaction. See you later. Carte blanche. All the cameras come around for a public affair.